Elizabeth Cassidy's knuckles were white against the worn leather of her traveling case as she stared down at the telegram that had changed everything. 6 words were all it took to shatter her carefully laid plans. Bride too old, stop, arrangement canceled. Laramie, Wyoming Territory, 1875, a place she'd never seen but had pinned all her hopes on. Now she stood at the dusty train station with nowhere to go and the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly upon her 34-year-old shoulders. "Miss, you look like you've seen a ghost." The voice belonged to a tall figure silhouetted against the harsh sunlight. Elizabeth hastily folded the telegram and tucked it into her sleeve. "I'm quite all right, thank you," she replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The man stepped closer, and she could see him clearly now, weathered face, kind eyes the color of a summer sky, and the unmistakable attire of a working cowboy. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. "Zach Morgan," he offered with a slight bow. "And forgive me for saying so, but you don't look all right at all." Elizabeth Cassidy, no. She corrected herself mentally. Winifred Smith now, the name she'd adopted when answering the advertisement for a mail-order bride, stood straighter. "I find myself in an unexpected predicament, Mr. Morgan, but I assure you I can manage." His eyes flickered to her traveling case and the small trunk at her feet, all her worldly possessions. "You're waiting for someone?" "I was," she admitted. "But it seems the gentleman in question has had a change of heart." Understanding dawned on his face. Mail-order arrangement. Winifred's cheeks flushed with humiliation. She'd never imagined discussing her situation with a stranger, especially not one so direct. "Yes," she answered simply, seeing no point in denial. Zach Morgan's expression softened. "Happens more than folks care to admit. Men write for brides, then lose their nerve when the time comes." He paused. "If you don't mind my asking, what reason did he give?" Winifred hesitated, then extracted the telegram. "Apparently, I'm too old." The cowboy's eyebrows rose as he studied her. "Too old? Why, you can't be more than 34, she supplied, lifting her chin slightly. "Ancient by frontier standards, it seems." To her surprise, Zach Morgan laughed, not unkindly but with genuine amusement. "Madam, out here 34 isn't old, it's experienced, and experience is something worth its weight in gold." A small smile played at her lips despite herself. "That's kind of you to say, Mr. Morgan, though I doubt Mr. Peterson shares your sentiment." "His loss," Zach said firmly. He replaced his hat and glanced down the empty street. "You have someplace to go, family back east." Winifred shook her head. There was nothing to return to in Boston, her parents long dead, the modest family home sold to pay debts, and her position as a schoolteacher filled by someone younger when the new headmaster took over. The irony wasn't lost on her. "I see," said Zach, though he couldn't possibly understand the depth of her predicament. "Well, Miss Smith, Winifred Smith." "Miss Smith, I own a small cattle ranch about 15 miles outside of town. I need someone to help with the house and cooking. My sister managed it until last month when she married and moved to Colorado." He hesitated, clearly choosing his next words carefully. "It would be temporary, just until you decide what's next. Proper accommodations, fair wages, and my word as a gentleman that you'll be treated with respect." Winifred regarded him skeptically. "Why would you offer employment to a complete stranger?" "Because I know what it's like to be stranded with nowhere to turn," he answered simply. "And because you look like someone who doesn't deserve the hand you've been dealt today." She studied him carefully, weighing her limited options. The money she'd brought would barely cover a week at the hotel, and then what? Return east in defeat. Take a position as a saloon girl. The latter thought made her shudder. "I was a school teacher in Boston," she offered, as if this qualification might make her more suitable for housekeeping. Zack smiled. Even better. I've got books gathering dust that could use a reader's touch. Before she could respond, he continued, "Look, Miss Smith, I'm heading back to the ranch now. You're welcome to join me, see the place, and if it doesn't suit you, I'll bring you back to town tomorrow. No obligations." Winifred hesitated only briefly. "Very well, Mr. Morgan. I accept your offer temporarily." "Excellent." He reached for her trunk. "And Miss Smith, for what it's worth, you're just the right age for ranch life. Young folks don't always have the patience for it." As Zack Morgan loaded her belongings onto his wagon, Winifred couldn't help but wonder if she was making another terrible mistake. But as they pulled away from the station, leaving behind the remnants of her failed marriage plans, she felt something unexpected relief, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of hope. The journey to Zack Morgan's ranch took nearly 3 hours, winding through rolling plains that gradually gave way to more varied terrain. Winifred took in the landscape with quiet wonder so different from Boston's crowded streets and disciplined gardens. Here, nature sprawled untamed in all directions, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grasslands. "It's beautiful," she admitted, breaking a long silence. Zack nodded, his eyes never leaving the trail ahead. "Took me years to truly see it." When you're working the land, fighting it sometimes, you can miss the beauty right in front of you. "How long have you been here?" "Bought the land 12 years ago, right after the war," he answered. "Came west with nothing but nightmares and a determination to find something worth living for." The way he mentioned the war without specifying which side he'd fought for told her he was careful with strangers. The nation's wounds were still raw, even a decade later. "And did you," she asked, "find something worth living for?" A smile creased the corners of his eyes. "Every morning when I watched the sun rise over my own land, I'd say I did." They crested a gentle hill, and below them stretched a modest but well-maintained ranch. A sturdy log house stood as the centerpiece, with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings arranged nearby. It wasn't grand, but it had an undeniable charm that spoke of care and hard work. "Morgan Creek Ranch," Zack announced with quiet pride, "named for the stream that runs through the northern pasture." As they approached, Winifred noticed details that pleased her: a vegetable garden to one side of the house, chickens pecking contentedly in a fenced yard, wildflowers growing near the porch steps. It was a working ranch, but someone had taken time for beauty too. "Your sister's touch, I presume." She nodded toward the flowers. "Sarah insisted a home needed more than just function," he acknowledged. "Said I'd turn into a wild man without some civilizing influences." When they reached the house, a young man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked to be in his early 20s, with the same blue eyes as Zack but a leaner build. "That's Daniel, my nephew," Zack explained. "Sarah's boy. He stayed on when she left, has a knack with horses that would be wasted elsewhere." Daniel approached the wagon, curiosity evident on his face. "Uncle Zack, didn't expect you back so soon." His eyes landed on Winifred. "Madam, Daniel, this is Miss Winifred Smith. She'll be helping us with the house for a while." Zack jumped down from the wagon and offered his hand to assist Winifred. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Smith," Daniel said, tipping his hat. "Does this mean I don't have to cook anymore?" Zack shot his nephew a warning look, but Winifred laughed. "If my cooking proves better than yours, young man, then yes." "Trust me, madam, a pot of burned beans would be an improvement," Daniel grinned. Zack unloaded her trunk and case. "Daniel, take these to Sarah's old room, would you? Then see to the horses." As Daniel carried her belongings inside, Zack guided Winifred toward the house. "It's not what you might be accustomed to in Boston, but it's solid and weather-tight. The main room was larger than she expected, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Simple but sturdy furniture filled the space: a dining table with 6 chairs, a sofa covered in a faded quilt, bookshelves built into the wall beside the fireplace. It was masculine but not unwelcoming. "The kitchen's through there," Zach pointed to a doorway. "My room's at the back of the house. Sarah's, yours now, is upstairs, along with Daniel's and a small storage room." Winifred nodded, taking it all in. "It's very nice, Mr. Morgan." "Zach, please. If you're going to be living here, even temporarily, Mr. Morgan will get tiresome fast. Then you must call me Winifred." He studied her for a moment. "Does anyone call you Winnie?" She shook her head. "Not since I was a girl." "Well, Winifred it is then." He cleared his throat. "You must be hungry after your journey. There's bread and cold ham in the kitchen. I need to check something with Daniel, then I'll show you around properly." After Zach left, Winifred wandered through the house, familiarizing herself with her new surroundings. The kitchen was surprisingly well equipped, if somewhat disorganized. She found the bread and ham Zach had mentioned, along with butter and preserves. Upstairs, she discovered her room simply furnished with a bed, dresser, washstand, and rocking chair near the window. Someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the dresser, Daniel's doing, she suspected, upon Zach's instructions. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her personal items on the dresser. When she was finished, she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to process the day's dramatic turn. That morning, she had been Winifred Smith, mail-order bride, traveling to meet her future husband, a man she knew only through a few polite letters. Now she was, what exactly? A housekeeper. A temporary solution to a bachelor's domestic problems. Yet despite the uncertainty, she couldn't deny that being here felt infinitely better than facing rejection at the train station. Zach Morgan had offered her kindness when she needed it most, and for that, she was grateful. A knock at the open door interrupted her thoughts. Zach stood there, hat in hand. "Everything to your liking?" "Yes, thank you. It's a lovely room." "Good." He shifted his weight slightly. "I've been thinking about your situation. I want to be clear that this arrangement benefits me as much as you. Since Sarah left, we've been living like bachelors, eating poorly, letting dust gather, wearing shirts until they could stand up on their own." The image made her smile. "I understand, and I appreciate your honesty. There's something else." He stepped into the room, maintaining a respectful distance. "You mentioned you were a teacher. Daniel never had much schooling. Sarah taught him to read and cipher, but not much beyond that. He's smart, though lacks refinement. If you were willing to continue his education during the evenings, I'd increase your wages accordingly." The offer surprised her. "I'd be happy to. Does Daniel share your enthusiasm for the idea?" A wry smile crossed Zach's face. "He will when I tell him it's not optional. The boy needs more than just horse sense to make his way in this changing world." Winifred nodded. "I'd be delighted to teach him." "Thank you." Zach moved toward the door but paused. "One more thing, Winifred. Whatever your reasons for becoming a mail-order bride, they're your business. No one here will pry or judge." His consideration touched her. "I appreciate that, Zach." After he left, Winifred moved to the window, gazing out at the vast Wyoming landscape bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset. For the first time since receiving that devastating telegram, she felt a sense of peace. Perhaps this unexpected detour would lead somewhere worthwhile after all. Dinner that first evening at Morgan Creek Ranch was a revelation. Winifred had taken stock of the kitchen's provisions and managed to prepare a simple but satisfying meal of pan-fried ham, potatoes with herbs, and biscuits she'd quickly mixed and baked. Both men ate with such enthusiasm that Winifred couldn't help but feel pleased. "I take it this meets with your approval?" she asked, amused by Daniel's barely restrained speed. "Miss Smith," Daniel said between mouthfuls, "if you cooked nothing but this for the rest of my days, I'd die a happy man." Zack gave his nephew a stern look. "Mind your manners, Daniel." "But yes, Winifred, this is excellent, thank you." After they finished, Daniel excused himself to check on a mare about to foal, leaving Winifred and Zack alone at the table. She began gathering the dishes, but he stopped her. "Leave those. You've done enough for your first day." He poured coffee for them both. "Tell me about your teaching in Boston. What subjects did you favor?" Winifred accepted the coffee gratefully. "I taught everything required: arithmetic, geography, history, but literature was my passion. I believe stories connect us to the wider world, especially for children who may never travel beyond their own city blocks." "And what brought you to teaching?" "My father was a professor at Harvard. Education was revered in our home." She smiled at the memory. "When my mother died, he raised me alone, surrounded by books and ideas. Teaching seemed the natural path." Zack nodded thoughtfully. "Yet you left it behind to come west as a mail-order bride." The observation wasn't a question, yet Winifred felt compelled to explain. "The new headmaster preferred younger teachers, said I lacked vitality. The irony of today's rejection isn't lost on me. Fools exist everywhere, it seems." His directness surprised her. "Though I'm beginning to think Mr. Peterson's poor judgment might prove fortunate for Morgan Creek Ranch." The compliment warmed her, but she remained practical. "This is temporary, Zack. We both know that." "Of course," he agreed, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. The next morning, Winifred rose early, determined to establish her worth. She dressed in her simplest gown and pinned her chestnut hair in a practical bun before heading downstairs. To her surprise, the kitchen wasn't empty. Zack stood at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled suspiciously like burning oats. "Good morning," she said, announcing her presence. He turned, looking almost sheepish. "Morning. Thought I'd start breakfast, but I'm reminded why Daniel complained about my cooking." Winifred moved beside him, assessing the damage. "May I?" He stepped aside gratefully, watching as she salvaged the oatmeal with additional water and a sprinkle of salt. "We usually eat at sunrise, but I figured you might want to sleep later after your journey." "I'm an early riser," she assured him, locating honey and dried berries in the pantry to improve the bland oatmeal. "On a ranch, I imagine dawn starts the day." "It does indeed." He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "Daniel and I have to check the north pasture fence today." "Might be gone until mid-afternoon." Winifred nodded. "I'll use the time to properly organize the kitchen and assess what needs cleaning elsewhere. Do what you think best. This is your domain now." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Sarah left a list of local suppliers, who has the best flour, which butcher doesn't cheat on weights, that sort of thing. It's in the drawer by the sink." The thoughtfulness of having such information ready for her was touching. "Thank you. That will be helpful." Daniel joined them soon after, and the three ate breakfast together, the men discussing the day's tasks while Winifred mentally catalogued all she wanted to accomplish. It felt strange but not unpleasant to be part of this small household, even if only temporarily. After the men departed, Winifred set to work with vigor. She began in the kitchen, emptying cupboards, scrubbing shelves, and reorganizing everything logically. She found Sarah's notes exactly where Zack had indicated detailed information about local merchants, and even a few recipes adapted to cooking on a wood stove. By mid-morning, she had moved to the main room, where she discovered Zack's book collection, was indeed impressive and surprisingly diverse histories of the West alongside classics of literature, scientific texts beside poetry volumes. She carefully dusted each book, noting titles she looked forward to exploring. When she reached the mantelpiece, she paused at a daguerreotype in a simple frame, a younger Zack in a Union uniform standing beside a seated woman who shared his eyes. Sarah, she presumed, though the woman in the image was barely more than a girl. That was taken right before I left for the war. Winifred startled, nearly dropping the frame. She hadn't heard Zack return. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "You weren't." He crossed to stand beside her, taking the image gently. Sarah was 16 then. Our parents had died the year before influenza. I had no choice but to take her with me when I enlisted. She stayed near your regiment, he nodded. Worked as a laundress for the officers. Not ideal for a young girl, but safer than leaving her alone. He replaced the image on the mantel. When the war ended, we came west together. She sacrificed her youth caring for me when the nightmares were at their worst. The vulnerability in this admission moved Winifred deeply. "She sounds remarkable, she is." His expression softened. "After all she gave up for me, I couldn't deny her chance at happiness when Tom Hollister asked for her hand, even if it meant losing her here at the ranch. You miss her. Every day." He looked around at the half-cleaned room. "But it seems we're managing to soldier on." He cleared his throat. "I just came back for some tools. Daniel's still at the north fence." "I'll have dinner ready whenever you return," she promised. Zack hesitated at the door. "Winifred, thank you, the place already looks better." After he left, Winifred returned to her tasks with renewed purpose, touched by the glimpse into Zack's past. By late afternoon, she had transformed the main living area's floors swept, surfaces polished, curtains shaken free of dust, and fresh wildflowers arranged on the table. She had also prepared a hearty stew that simmered slowly on the stove, filling the house with enticing aromas. When Zack and Daniel finally returned, tired and hungry, their appreciation for her efforts was evident. "It's like walking into a different house," Daniel marveled, looking around the tidy room. Zack's gaze met hers. "You've worked wonders." "Just a little woman's touch," she replied modestly, though pleased by their reaction. Over the next 2 weeks, a comfortable routine developed at Morgan Creek Ranch. Winifred rose early to prepare breakfast and pack lunches for the men if they would be away from the house. Her days were filled with domestic tasks: cooking, cleaning, mending clothes, tending the vegetable garden, and collecting eggs from the chickens. In the evenings after dinner, she began teaching Daniel. Despite his initial reluctance, he proved to be a quick study, particularly when the subject matter interested him. Winifred discovered that connecting lessons to ranch life, calculating acreage for cattle grazing, or reading about advances in animal husbandry, held his attention far better than abstract examples. Zack often joined these lessons, ostensibly to ensure Daniel applied himself, but Winifred noticed how he listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his own curiosity about subjects beyond his experience. One evening, when Daniel had gone to bed, Zack lingered in the main room where Winifred sat mending one of his shirts. "You're good with him," he observed, settling into a chair across from her. "He's learning more from you in weeks than he did in years of sporadic schooling." Winifred smiled without looking up from her stitching. "He's naturally intelligent, he just needs to see the purpose in education." Sarah always said the same. He watched her nimble fingers work. "Daniel mentioned you've been teaching him poetry." "Walt Whitman," she confirmed. "I noticed your copy of Leaves of Grass was well worn." "You found me out," he admitted with a small smile. "A Union colonel gave it to me during the war. Said Whitman's words might help make sense of the chaos we were living through." He paused. Did they help you? Make sense of things, I mean. Winifred set down her mending, considering the unexpected question. They reminded me that life continues despite loss, that beauty persists even in difficult circumstances. You've known loss too. It wasn't a question. My father died 5 years ago, she said quietly. Without his protection, I found Boston much less welcoming than before. A woman alone, unmarried at my age. People make assumptions. So you answered Mr. Peterson's advertisement. One of many I wrote to, she admitted. Most never replied when I honestly stated my age. Their loss, Zach said firmly, echoing his words from their first meeting. Winifred resumed her mending, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I should finish this. The tear was worse than it appeared. Zach took the hint and stood. I'll leave you to it then. Good night, Winifred. Good night, Zach. After he left, Winifred continued stitching, her thoughts tumultuous. She had been at Morgan Creek Ranch for only 2 weeks, yet already it felt more like home than anywhere since her father's house in Boston. The work was hard but satisfying, the company agreeable, the surroundings beautiful in their wild way. But she couldn't allow herself to grow too comfortable. This was temporary, a kindness extended in a moment of need, nothing more. Soon, she would need to make more permanent arrangements for her future. The thought filled her with unexpected sadness. The following Saturday brought a welcome change to their routine. Zach announced at breakfast that they would all go into Laramie for supplies and to attend the monthly social at the town hall. A social? Winifred asked, surprised. Dancing, food, general merrymaking, Daniel explained enthusiastically. The whole county turns out. Even Uncle Zach scrubs up nice for it. Zach cleared his throat. We don't have to attend if you'd rather not, Winifred, but it seemed you might enjoy some female company after being stranded with just us for company. The consideration touched her. I would like that very much. Thank you. They set out mid-morning, the wagon loaded with goods to trade eggs, butter, and vegetables from their garden. Winifred wore her second-best dress, a forest green poplin with modest lace at the collar and cuffs. She had debated wearing her best blue silk, but decided it might appear too formal for a country gathering. The journey passed pleasantly, with Daniel pointing out landmarks and sharing local history. Winifred noticed that Zach seemed more relaxed away from the constant demands of the ranch, even humming softly as he drove the wagon. Laramie was busier than when Winifred had arrived, the streets filled with wagons and riders from outlying ranches and farms. Zach conducted their business efficiently, trading their goods, purchasing supplies they couldn't produce themselves, and arranging for everything to be loaded into the wagon later. Would you like to look around the shops while we're here? He asked Winifred. Daniel can check on the horseshoes I ordered, and I need to speak with the land office. Winifred welcomed the chance to explore on her own. That would be lovely. Shall we meet back here in an hour? With a small amount of money Zach had insisted she take as advance payment for her work, Winifred browsed the town's limited but interesting shops. She purchased some hair ribbons, a new thimble to replace one she'd lost, and after considerable deliberation, fabric for a new dress. The last item felt like an indulgence, an admission that she might stay at Morgan Creek Ranch longer than initially planned. As promised, she returned to their meeting spot after an hour, her purchases wrapped in brown paper. Zach was already waiting, watching the street with a thoughtful expression. Did you find what you needed? He asked when he spotted her. Yes, thank you. She held up her small bundle. Nothing extravagant, but a few necessities. He seemed about to say more when a voice called out behind them. Well, if it isn't Zachary Morgan, come down from his mountain. They turned to see a well-dressed man approaching, followed by a younger woman in an elaborate gown that seemed out of place in the frontier town. "Thomas," Zack acknowledged with a stiff nod. "Good to see you." The man's gaze shifted to Winifred, undisguised curiosity in his expression. "And who might this lovely lady be?" Zack's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thomas Peterson, this is Miss Winifred Smith. She's helping at the ranch since Sarah married Peterson." The name hit Winifred like a physical blow. This was the man who had rejected her, who had deemed her too old without even meeting her. Recognition dawned in Peterson's eyes as well, followed by visible discomfort. "Miss Smith," he managed, tipping his hat. "A pleasure, Mr. Peterson." Winifred kept her voice steady, though her heart raced. What a surprise! The young woman beside Peterson, she couldn't be more than 20, tugged at his arm impatiently. "Thomas, introduce me properly." "Of course, my dear. This is Miss Clara Reynolds, recently arrived from St. Louis." His tone carried unmistakable pride. "My fiancée." So this was her replacement, young, pretty, and clearly from money, judging by her attire. Winifred felt Zack stiffen beside her. "Congratulations," he said flatly. "If you'll excuse us, we have other business to attend to." Of course. Peterson seemed eager to end the uncomfortable encounter. "Perhaps we'll see you at the social this evening." "Perhaps," Zack replied noncommittally, placing a protective hand at the small of Winifred's back as he guided her away. Once they were out of earshot, he leaned close. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she answered automatically, then reconsidered. "No, that was unexpected. I'm sorry." His voice was gentle. "Had I known he would be in town today, I would have warned you. It's not your fault." She took a steadying breath. "It was bound to happen eventually in a town this size." Zack's expression darkened. "The way he looked at you like he was calculating your worth makes me want to," he stopped himself. "Forgive me, that's not helpful." "Actually, it is," Winifred admitted, surprising herself with the truth of it. "It's nice to know someone thinks I deserved better." Before Zack could respond, Daniel bounded up to them, excited about the new horseshoes he'd inspected. The moment for further discussion passed, but Winifred felt a shift between them, a deepening of understanding, a strengthening of alliance. As they prepared to return to the ranch to rest before the evening social, Winifred found herself dreading the prospect of facing Peterson and his young fiancé again. Yet with Zack and Daniel beside her, she felt a courage she hadn't expected, not just to endure the encounter, but perhaps even to show Thomas Peterson exactly what he had rejected. The social at Laramie's town hall exceeded Winifred's expectations. The simple building had been transformed with lanterns and bunting. A small band played lively tunes in one corner, and tables laden with food lined the walls. It seemed everyone within 20 miles had gathered for the occasion, families with children of all ages, young couples, elderly folks seated in chairs of honor. Daniel disappeared almost immediately to join a group of young people his age, while Zack stayed protectively at Winifred's side. He looked different tonight, his usual work clothes replaced by a clean dark suit, hair neatly combed, freshly shaved. The transformation was striking. "You look very handsome," Winifred remarked without thinking, then blushed at her own boldness. Zack's eyes crinkled with pleasure. "And you look beautiful, Winifred. Green suits you." Before she could respond, they were approached by a middle-aged couple. "Zack Morgan, about time you showed your face in town again," the woman declared, pulling him into a warm embrace. "Maggie, Robert," Zack greeted them with genuine affection. "Allow me to introduce Miss Winifred Smith. Winifred, these are the Harrises, my closest neighbors, though close means 3 miles out here." "We've heard all about you, dear," Maggie said, taking Winifred's hands in her own. Sarah wrote that Zack had finally found a lady to civilize that bachelor household of his. Winifred shot Zack a questioning look. He hadn't mentioned corresponding with his sister about her. I may have written to Sarah, he admitted. She worries. Well, we're delighted to meet you, Robert Harris added. Any woman brave enough to take on cooking for Morgan men deserves a medal. The warmth of their welcome touched Winifred deeply. As the evening progressed, she was introduced to more of Zack's neighbors and acquaintances, all of whom treated her as if she belonged at his side. No one questioned her presence or status, accepting Zack's simple introduction without pressing for details. After an hour of socializing, the band struck up a waltz. Zack turned to her with unexpected formality. "Miss Smith, would you do me the honor?" "I'd be delighted, Mr. Morgan," she replied, matching his playful tone. As he led her onto the floor, she noticed Thomas Peterson watching them from across the room, his young fiancée chattering beside him, apparently oblivious to his distraction. Winifred felt a small, vindictive pleasure at his evident surprise. Then Zack's hand settled at her waist, and all thoughts of Peterson vanished. They moved together with surprising ease, as if they had danced many times before. "You dance beautifully," she remarked. "My mother insisted I learn. Said no woman would marry a man who stepped on her toes." His expression grew wistful. She died before she could see if her lessons paid off. "They did," Winifred assured him, "though I'm surprised you never married." "The war changed me," he said simply. "Afterward, I couldn't imagine burdening a wife with the man I'd become." And then there was Sarah to consider. "And now," the question slipped out before she could stop it. His eyes held hers. "Now I'm beginning to reconsider many things I once thought certain." The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter. They completed the dance in silence, a new awareness humming between them. When the music ended, Zack reluctantly released her. "Would you like some punch, please?" she nodded, needing a moment to collect herself. As Zack moved toward the refreshment table, Winifred found herself suddenly face to face with Thomas Peterson. "Miss Smith," he began awkwardly, "I feel I owe you an explanation." "You owe me nothing, Mr. Peterson," she replied coolly. He persisted. "When I wrote that advertisement, I had certain expectations. When you disclosed your age in your letter, I had hoped for someone younger who could still bear children." The bluntness of his statement stung. "Yet you waited until I'd traveled all this way to inform me of your decision." Peterson had the grace to look ashamed. "I should have been forthright sooner. I apologize for the inconvenience." "Inconvenience," Winifred repeated incredulously. "Mr. Peterson, I sold everything I owned, left my home, and traveled thousands of miles based on your commitment." "Yes, well." He shifted uncomfortably. "It appears things have worked out for you nonetheless. Morgan seems quite attentive." The implication in his tone ignited Winifred's temper. "Mr. Morgan offered me employment and respectability when your rejection left me stranded. His kindness speaks volumes about his character." Peterson's expression soured. "I meant no offense. It's just curious how quickly you established yourself in his household." "Everything all right here," Zack had returned, 2 cups of punch in hand. His tone was pleasant, but his eyes were hard as they fixed on Peterson. "Perfectly fine," Winifred assured him, taking one of the cups. "Mr. Peterson was just leaving." Peterson nodded stiffly. "Morgan, Miss Smith." He retreated toward his fiancée, who was watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "What did he say to upset you?" Zack asked quietly. Winifred shook her head. "Nothing worth repeating. Though I will say, the more I know of Thomas Peterson, the more grateful I am that he rejected me." Zack's expression softened. "His loss, my gain." The simple statement, delivered without pretense, warmed her more than the punch ever could. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly. Winifred danced not only with Zack, but with several other men, including Robert Harris and even the town's mayor. Daniel joined them for the final set, a lively Virginia reel that left everyone breathless and laughing. As they drove home under a canopy of stars, Daniel dozed in the back of the wagon while Zack and Winifred sat side by side on the front seat. The night was cool but not uncomfortable, the silence between them companionable. "Thank you for tonight," Winifred said softly. "It was wonderful to feel part of a community again." "You were a hit," Zack replied, his voice equally low. "Maggie Harris already invited you to her quilting circle next week." "I'd like that." She hesitated. "Zack, everyone seemed to think that we were." "I know." He kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "I should have corrected them, but selfishly, I enjoyed seeing you accepted as part of my life." The admission hung in the air between them, significant and fragile. "Would that be so terrible?" she asked, barely audible above the wagon's creaking. His hand found hers in the darkness, warm and calloused. "Not terrible at all, Winifred. Quite the opposite." They rode the rest of the way home in silence, hands joined, each contemplating possibilities neither had imagined just weeks before. The following days brought subtle, yet significant changes to life at Morgan Creek Ranch. Nothing was spoken explicitly, but Winifred noticed Zack finding more reasons to be near the house during the day, bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted while checking fence lines, lingering over meals to tell stories of his early days in Wyoming. For her part, she began adding special touches to their simple meals, using precious spices sparingly to create dishes she thought he might enjoy, and spending evenings on the porch with him after Daniel retired, talking about books and dreams and memories. A month after the social in Laramie, Winifred realized with a start that she had stopped thinking of her stay as temporary. She had begun planning improvements to the garden for the following spring, considering how to expand Daniel's education beyond basic subjects, and mentally noting repairs the house would need before winter arrived. Somehow, without formal discussion, Morgan Creek Ranch had become home. One afternoon in late summer she was kneading bread dough when Zack entered the kitchen, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "You have a moment?" he asked, removing his hat. "Of course." She wiped flour from her hands. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong." He gestured toward the door. "Would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Winifred covered the dough with a cloth and followed him outside. They walked in comfortable silence past the barn and corral, following a narrow path that led toward a stand of cottonwood trees near the creek that gave the ranch its name. As they approached, Winifred gasped softly. Someone Zack, she presumed, had created a small, sheltered area beneath the largest tree. A bench fashioned from a split log faced the water, and wildflowers had been transplanted to form a natural garden around the space. "Zack, it's beautiful," she breathed. Sarah always said the ranch needed a proper place for contemplation. He guided her to the bench. "I started working on it after you arrived, finished it yesterday." They sat together, watching the clear water of the creek flow past. Birds called in the trees above them, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of late summer blooms. "Winifred." Zack turned to face her, his expression solemn. "I've been trying to find the right words for weeks now." Her heart quickened. "Words for what?" "For asking you to stay. Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife." Though she had begun to hope for such a proposal, the reality of it left her momentarily speechless. Zack continued, his voice growing more confident. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know this life isn't what you imagined when you left Boston. But these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life since before the war." "Zack," he raised a hand gently. Please let me finish. I'm not Thomas Peterson. I don't want a young bride who doesn't know her own mind. I want a partner, a woman with experience and strength and wisdom. Someone who understands that life isn't always easy but chooses joy anyway. He took her hands in his. You're just the right age for me, Winifred, perfect in every way that matters. Tears welled in her eyes. I came west believing my age made me undesirable, that I had missed my chance for happiness. And I believed my past made me unworthy of a future with someone like you, he said softly. Perhaps we were both wrong. Perhaps we were, she agreed, squeezing his hands. Yes, Zach. I will stay, and I will be your wife. His smile was brilliant, transforming his weathered face. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded eagerly. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zach rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, I've never been very good with words of love. You've done remarkably well so far, she assured him, her heart overflowing with happiness. There's something else, he said, reaching into his pocket. This belonged to my mother. I want you to have it. He opened his palm to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl set in the center. It's not fancy, but it's perfect, Winifred interrupted, extending her left hand. Absolutely perfect. As Zach slipped the ring onto her finger, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment, from rejected mail-order bride to beloved fiancé in the span of a summer. Thomas Peterson's cruel dismissal had proven the greatest blessing of her life. When shall we marry? She asked, admiring how the pearl caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves above. As soon as you wish, Zach replied. Though I should warn you that Sarah will never forgive me if we don't wait until she can return for the wedding. She's been nagging me to find a wife for years. Winifred laughed. Then we'll wait for Sarah. Besides, I'd like to know the woman who raised such a fine young man in Daniel and kept you from turning completely wild. She'll adore you, he promised, pulling her close against his side. Almost as much as I do. They remained by the creek until the shadows lengthened, planning their future together, both marveling at how rejection had ultimately led to this perfect acceptance. News of their engagement spread quickly through the surrounding community. Maggie Harris insisted on hosting a celebration dinner at her home, while the women of Laramie's quilting circle began work on a wedding quilt as a gift. Daniel, after his initial surprise, embraced the news enthusiastically, confiding to Winifred that he'd hoped his uncle would come to his senses about her. Sarah's response arrived by telegraph a week after Zach sent word of their engagement. Overjoyed stop arriving October with Tom stop don't dare marry without me stop love to Winifred already stop. See, already beloved by my sister, Zach remarked as they read the message together. Though we'll have to endure her crowing about being right all along. Right about what? Winifred asked. About me needing a wife to be truly happy. He kissed her cheek. She's insufferably smug when proven correct. October brought crisp days, golden leaves, and Sarah Morgan Hollister, accompanied by her husband Tom. The reunion between brother and sister was touching to witness. Sarah, a petite woman with Zach's blue eyes and a quick smile, embraced her brother fiercely before turning her assessment to Winifred. So you're the woman who finally captured my brother's heart, she declared, studying Winifred intently before breaking into a wide smile. I knew you'd be perfect the moment he described you in his letter. Don't believe a word she says, Zach warned good-naturedly. She thought I'd die a bachelor. Only because you were too stubborn to see what you needed, Sarah retorted, linking her arm through Winifred's. Now tell me everything about how you met. Zach's letters were frustratingly short on details. The women formed an immediate bond. with Sarah sharing embarrassing stories from Zach's youth and Winifred recounting how they had met at the train station. When Winifred revealed that she had originally come west as Thomas Peterson's mail-order bride, Sarah's indignation was fierce. "That pompous fool," she exclaimed. "Why, he's lucky I wasn't here when he rejected you. I'd have given him a piece of my mind." "His rejection was the greatest gift he could have given me," Winifred replied, glancing toward Zach, who was showing Tom improvements to the barn. "It led me here." Sarah's expression softened. "I've never seen Zach so content. You've brought something back to him that I feared was lost forever in the war." "He's done the same for me," Winifred admitted. "I came west feeling that life had passed me by, that I was too old for new beginnings." "Age is just a number," Sarah dismissed with a wave of her hand. "It's experience that matters, and love, especially love." The wedding took place on a perfect autumn day, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the blue Wyoming sky. Reverend Johnson from Laramie performed the ceremony on the ranch, with Sarah and Tom standing as witnesses and Daniel proudly serving as best man. Neighbors from miles around gathered to celebrate, bringing food and good wishes in equal measure. Winifred wore a new dress she had made from the fabric purchased during her first trip to Laramie, a deep blue that Sarah insisted matched her eyes perfectly. Her hair was adorned with white flowers from the garden she had nurtured since her arrival. "You are so beautiful," Zach whispered as they exchanged vows, his voice thick with emotion. "And you are everything I never dared hope for," she replied softly. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with dancing in the yard to fiddle music provided by a neighboring rancher and his sons. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Later, when the guests had departed and Sarah, Tom, and Daniel had tactfully retired to give the newlyweds privacy, Zach led Winifred to their room, his room, now theirs together. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a package wrapped in plain brown paper. "A wedding gift." Winifred unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with her new initials, W.M. "I thought you might like to write again," Zach explained. "You mentioned once how you used to keep journals before life became too demanding." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. "You remembered that. I mentioned it only once, weeks ago." "I remember everything you tell me," he said simply. "Your stories, your dreams, your disappointments, they're all precious to me." Winifred placed the journal carefully on the bedside table, then turned to her new husband. "I love you, Zach Morgan, more than I have words to express." "Then show me," he suggested, drawing her into his arms. And she did, their love finding expression beyond words as they began their life together. Winter came early that year, blanketing Morgan Creek Ranch in snow by mid-November. The newlyweds found themselves grateful for the forced closeness. The season imposed days spent in domestic tasks, evenings teaching Daniel or reading by the fire, nights discovering each other with increasing intimacy and tenderness. Winifred took to ranch life with unexpected aptitude. She learned to ride better, to help with calving when needed, to manage the household through the unique challenges of frontier winters. Zach, in turn, showed a willingness to bring more comfort and beauty into their home, building bookshelves for her growing collection, surprising her with fabric ordered from Denver for new curtains, even attempting to play the harmonica he had carried through the war but seldom touched since. When spring finally arrived, bringing new life to the land, it brought news of another kind as well. After several weeks of morning sickness she had tried to hide, Winifred finally shared her suspicion with Zach one evening as they sat together on the bench by the creek, now surrounded by early wildflowers. "A baby," he repeated, his expression transforming from confusion to wonder to pure joy. "You're certain?" "As certain as one can be without a doctor's confirmation," she replied, watching his reaction carefully. "I know at my age it's unexpected, wonderful," he corrected, gathering her into his arms. "It's wonderful, Winifred. A miracle." She relaxed against him, relief washing through her. "I was afraid you might worry, given that I'm 35 now." Zach placed his hand gently over her still flat stomach. "All I feel is gratitude. For you, for this child, for the chance to be a father when I'd long ago accepted I never would be." "You'll be a wonderful father," she assured him. "You already are to Daniel in many ways," he kissed her tenderly. "And you'll be a magnificent mother. Our child is blessed already." The news delighted everyone. Daniel was excited at the prospect of a cousin. Maggie Harris immediately began knitting tiny garments, and Sarah sent a telegram promising to return for the birth, even if Tom has to tie me to the train. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Winifred found herself tiring more easily than she had expected. Zach responded by hiring a young woman from town to help with the heavier housework, insisting Winifred rest when needed and consulting every medical text he could find about childbirth. "I'm not an invalid," she protested one afternoon when he insisted she nap instead of helping with bread making. "No, you're the most precious person in my world, carrying the second most precious," he replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Humor me, Mrs. Morgan." She couldn't help but smile at his protective instincts. "Very well, but only because you called me Mrs. Morgan. I still feel a thrill every time I hear it." In late November, almost exactly a year after Winifred's arrival at Morgan Creek Ranch, their son was born after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. Sarah had indeed returned as promised, her experience with childbirth proving invaluable during the long hours before the baby finally arrived. "He's perfect," Zach whispered, cradling his newborn son while seated beside Winifred's bed. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and your beautiful eyes." "William," Winifred murmured tiredly. "William Zachary Morgan." "William," Zach repeated, testing the name. "After your father," she nodded. "If you approve." "I do." He carefully transferred their son back to her arms. "William Morgan, a strong name for a strong boy." Watching her husband gaze adoringly at their child, Winifred felt overwhelming gratitude. At 35, when society had deemed her too old for marriage, too old for motherhood, too old for new beginnings, she had found all three, and more importantly, she had found love with a man who valued her exactly as she was. "What are you thinking?" Zach asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about that day at the train station," she replied. "How devastated I felt when I read Peterson's telegram. How certain I was that my life was over before it had truly begun." Zach took her free hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And now I know it was just beginning." She smiled down at their son, then back at her husband. "You were right that day. I was just the right age for this life, for you, for all of it." "We were just the right age for each other," he corrected gently. Two people who had lived enough to recognize what truly matters when we found it. As if in agreement, little William made a soft sound, his tiny hand curling around his father's finger with surprising strength, a perfect beginning to a new chapter in their unlikely love story. Epilogue: 5 years later, the spring fair in Laramie always drew crowds from across the county, but this year's event was especially well attended. Winifred Morgan stood at her display table, arranging jars of preserves and honey from Morgan Creek Ranch while keeping an eye on 4-year-old William and his 2-year-old sister, Sarah Elizabeth, who were being entertained by their Uncle Daniel. At 26, Daniel had grown into a fine young man. After completing his education under Winifred's tutelage, he had spent 2 years at college in Denver before returning to help manage the ranch, which had expanded considerably under the Morgan family's careful stewardship. "Mama, look," William called, pointing excitedly as a familiar wagon approached through the crowded fairgrounds. Winifred smiled as Zack pulled the wagon to a stop nearby. At 45, he was still the handsome cowboy who had rescued her at the train station, though silver now dominated his temples and laugh lines framed his eyes more prominently evidence of the happy years they had shared. "Sorry I'm late," he said, jumping down from the wagon seat. "Maggie Harris insisted I bring her prize quilt since she's laid up with that sprained ankle." "You're just in time," Winifred assured him as the children rushed to greet their father. "The judging for preserves starts in an hour." Zack scooped up Sarah Elizabeth, who squealed with delight as he swung her high. "And how's my little princess today? Hungry," the toddler declared, pointing toward a nearby food stall. "That's my girl," he laughed, setting her down to ruffle William's hair. "And you, young man?" "Behaving for your mother," William nodded solemnly. "I helped arrange the jars by color just like Mama showed me." "Good lad." Zack straightened, his eyes finding Winifred's with the same warmth that still made her heart skip. "And how are you, Mrs. Morgan?" "Happier by the minute," she replied truthfully. "Especially now that you're here." He moved to her side, placing a gentle hand at the small of her back, a gesture of intimacy and possession that had become so familiar over their years together. "The ranch is secure for the day. Johnson and his boys will keep an eye on things. Then we can enjoy the fair properly," Winifred said, leaning briefly against his solid strength before turning back to her display. As she adjusted the position of a particularly fine jar of strawberry preserves, a familiar voice caught her attention. "Mrs. Morgan, your display looks wonderful this year." Winifred looked up to see Clara Peterson, Thomas's wife, approaching with a toddler on her hip and a young boy clutching her skirts. The years had not been particularly kind to Clara, her youthful prettiness already fading into a pinched expression that spoke of disappointment. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson," Winifred replied cordially. "How are you and your family managing?" Clara answered with a tight smile. "Thomas is speaking with the bank again about the mortgage. Times are difficult." Winifred nodded sympathetically. Everyone knew the Petersons were struggling. Thomas had made a series of poor investments and now faced losing his property. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said sincerely. Despite their awkward history, she took no pleasure in their misfortune. Clara's gaze drifted to Zack, who was now showing the children a display of farm equipment nearby, then back to Winifred. "You were fortunate, you know, to find Mr. Morgan." The simple statement carried layers of meaning that Winifred understood all too well. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "I was very fortunate indeed." A look passed between the women, acknowledgement of how differently their lives had unfolded from what either had expected. Then Clara's son tugged impatiently at her skirt, breaking the moment. "I should go," she said. "Thomas will be looking for me." "Congratulations on your beautiful family, Mrs. Morgan." As Clara walked away, Winifred felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for her own happiness, compassion for Clara's evident struggles, and a small, human satisfaction that Thomas Peterson could see exactly what he had rejected. "Everything all right?" Zack had returned, his expression concerned. "Perfect," she assured him, smiling as William proudly showed his father a wooden toy he'd spotted at a nearby stall. Later that evening, after the children had been put to bed in the hotel room they'd rented for the night, Winifred and Zack sat together on a small balcony overlooking Laramie's Main Street. The spring air was cool but pleasant, filled with the sounds of the fair continuing in the distance. 3 blue ribbons, Zach remarked, raising his coffee cup in a toast. Morgan Creek Ranch preserves are officially the finest in the county. Winifred laughed softly. I suspect Judge Wilson was influenced by how much he enjoys our honey. He practically begged for another jar. It's not the honey he enjoys, it's the company of the beautiful woman who makes it. Zach set down his cup to take her hand. I saw you speaking with Clara Peterson today. Yes, Winifred sighed. I feel sorry for her. She's not much older now than I was when I arrived here, yet she looks worn down by life already. Thomas Peterson never appreciated what was truly valuable, Zach observed. Not in you, and apparently not in her either. Winifred squeezed his hand gratefully. Meeting Clara made me think about how differently things might have turned out if Peterson hadn't rejected me. I like to think we would have found each other anyway, Zach said firmly. Some things are meant to be, Winnie. She smiled at the nickname he only used in their most private moments. Is that so, Zachary Morgan? The practical rancher believes in fate now. I believe in us, he replied simply. In what we've built together, in what we still have to look forward to. In the soft glow of the lantern light, Winifred studied her husband's beloved face, the strong lines, the kind eyes, the mouth that still kissed her as if she were the most desirable woman in Wyoming territory. You ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Marrying a woman past her prime years. Zach's expression grew serious. Winifred Morgan, in the 5 years we've been married, you've given me 2 beautiful children, transformed a bachelor's shack into a true home, helped expand the ranch into one of the most successful in the county, and made me happier than I ever imagined possible. He cupped her cheek tenderly. There is nothing about you I would change, especially not your age or your experience. They're part of what makes you the woman I fall in love with more deeply every day. Tears pricked at her eyes. How do you always know exactly what to say? Practice, he teased, leaning forward to kiss her. And I plan to keep practicing for at least another 40 years. As their lips met, Winifred reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought her to this moment. Rejected for being too old at 34, she had instead found a man who valued her maturity, who had looked at her and declared she was just the right age for him. And he had been right. They had been exactly right for each other, 2 souls who had lived enough to recognize true worth when they found it, experienced enough to cherish the love they had built together, and wise enough to know that some beginnings are all the sweeter for arriving when least expected. In Zach's arms, with their children sleeping peacefully nearby and decades of possibilities stretching before them, Winifred knew with absolute certainty that the greatest adventures of her life had begun not in her youth, but in her supposed twilight proof that it was never too late for love to change everything.